Today we're going to be looking at what has quickly become my favorite weapon so far here in the First Descendant. This thing is an absolute beast. I featured it in our Enzo build from the other day, but now I have fully maxed this thing out. It's actually missing one upgrade to its unique ability, but it's not going to make a huge difference. I'm just missing one part there. So I'm not going to delay this video any further. I just want to get this out to you guys so you can see exactly how good this thing actually is. And it's not just good on Enzo. It does fit our crit Enzo incredibly well. Like, that is the main reason I built this thing, but it still works so well on any other character. It has a really good crit rate. It can shoot forever, basically. It has 171 rounds in the magazine when you build it the way that I do. And overall, it just does a ton of damage on my Enzo. I'm one magging hard mode Devourer in about 16-17 seconds. Basically, it just depends on when I start shooting at him. Once he spawns in is pretty much the time difference there. And it just does so well. It's so easy to use, and it just feels fantastic with any setup. I'm killing some of the other hard mode bosses in like 35 seconds to a minute at most. So it's not just like this is only going to work on Devourer or anything like that. Also, my passives on it are far from perfect. So there's a lot of upgrading that could be had, and also I can upgrade my Descendant a bit more too to give it a little bit more juice. But for the most part, you're going to be good to go for any sort of single target here. It just works so well and just outputs so much continuous damage. So I'm sorry if you've been going into the Tamer. I truly do think that this thing is going to be better than the Tamer at this point. I think its crit chance just blows it out of the water. And also considering it has a much larger magazine size, you can do so many more cool things, especially on our Enzo. So let's go ahead and take a full look at the Enduring Legacy here. Taking a look at the stats first with all of my mods on here, this is what it's going to end up being. It's going to be just about 25,000 firearm attack and a 672 fire rate. And like I said, 171 rounds in the magazine. It has a 2.7 second reload time, but you can cut this in about half. You can reload cancel about halfway through. So it takes almost no time at all to reload. So you're constantly going to be shooting out some bullets. And then a near 40% base critical hit rate on this thing. And then when you combine the Enzo and my ultimate, you're going to be seeing 100% critical hit rate on here. This is actually going to spoil you. When I'm using guns that aren't 100% crit rates anymore, it feels terrible, especially for mobbing. Having to shoot like a few extra bullets randomly just does not feel good, and you will get absolutely spoiled by the 100% crit rate. And then critical hit damage, we're at about 5.6 right here. You might be able to get this a little bit higher with some better passives, but for the most part, that's going to be where you're sitting, and it's going to feel really good. And I'm currently sitting at a 1.35 weak point damage, and this is actually going to be 1.85 with how weak point works. You get an extra 0.5 added on to whatever you see here, just because the base weak point is 0.5. So we're at a 1.85 in terms of the actual multiplier we'll see. So when you combine that with the 5.6 right here, you're going to be seeing some pretty large numbers and at a really good fire rate. Looking at our mods, this is the main setup that I ended up settling with. There is one other thing I want to try, but you really can't do that with how this game is set up right now. To max out a gun, you need to put a catalyst in every single slot, which means you can't really be mixing and matching things. So right now, rifling reinforcement is the thing I've been playing around with our final slot. Like, I tried have aiming for some extra weak point damage, but I found the accuracy actually to be pretty detrimental to this weapon. I felt like it was missing quite a bit, and I was actually losing some damage just because I wasn't hitting them. Also, with the main thing I use it with Enzo, I am getting some extra weak point on top of weak point sight here, so it becomes a little bit less necessary for me. So I personally have been keeping this off. You can replace rifling reinforcement with it if you want to for bossing, but I think this is just better all around for bossing and for mobbing. But the main thing I wanted to play around with was rifling reinforcement versus fire enhancement. Now, I can't really do this because these are different slots. So unless they add more capacity to our guns or allow us to change our sockets at free will, I can't really tell you exactly if this is worth it or not. I tried to do some tests between the two, and rifling reinforcement was giving me bigger numbers in the first part of the magazine, but later on with mental focus, you end up getting a ton of firearm attack towards the end of your magazine, so this becomes less beneficial. This was mainly just to front load the damage. That way when you're mobbing, you get more one taps, and also you have more damage up front while you're waiting for mental focus to stack up. And I found this to be super helpful for getting the one mag on Devourer. I was able to do it with fire enhancement as well, but for the most part, rifling reinforcement was my better bet. But feel free to try this out if you're willing to go a little bit more into the actual unique ability of the weapon, which we're going to be looking at here after the mods. Otherwise, the rest of the mods, action reaction for the base firearm attack. And then we're going to be maxing out our firearm critical hit damage here with concentration priority and critical hit damage. The reload time really doesn't matter because, like I said, you can reload cancel, which I'll show you in a little bit. But here we get a ton of extra critical hit damage, 100 and basically 95%. And then we're going to be maxing out our critical hit rate. So if you are using that Enzo, this is how you're going to be able to get that 100% critical hit rate and up to 40 just base right here. And then fire rate, this way we can empty that 171 rounds as quick as possible. So I would recommend using the base blue fire rate. That way you get the most possible. This is how we get the 171 is with expand weapon charge, the extra 49% rounds. And then we already went over rifling reinforcement, weak point for the extra weak point damage, and then finally mental focus. This is going to give you a huge damage buff the longer you hold the trigger. So when you are fighting any sort of boss, make sure you keep shooting. You're going to see this buff on the left side of your screen. So there are times that I actually try to keep this up just by shooting nothing. So say I'm shooting it, stacking it, you can see it's stacking on the left right there. I'm about to pass 40. So what I can do is just shoot it once every little bit. So say the boss is like going immune and I want to delay it, I can just keep shooting into nothing once like every second or two, and you can keep that buff active. So when they're ready to be shot again, you can lay in and keep that buff between your bursts. So that's a really helpful tactic I use from time to time with that mod. But for the most part, this has been working out incredibly well for me. Once again, the only thing I'd really play around with would be fire enhancement versus rifling reinforcement. Everything else I would never change. The Enduring Legacy's unique ability isn't all that impactful, so don't worry about getting this thing fully maxed out before you do anything else. Focus on getting all of your sockets polarized so you can fit in all your mods, and then go into the unique ability. But out of the gate, it's going to give you a range penalty, so as you upgrade it, this is going to become less and less, eventually disappear. Once again, I'm 1 upgrade away. I'm at level 3 out of 4. But for the most part, this thing is going to be helping your attribute status effect trigger rate. So you're going to be applying burn to enemies a little bit longer if you have the same passives that I do. But if you do have the same passives that I do, then you're going to go into quenching and then also this extra effect here. So you're going to be reducing their fire resistance. This isn't really all that impactful. It's going to be way more impactful if you do the fire enhancement route in terms of your mods. So if you are interested in that, then you're going to want to be upgrading this unique ability. But the other big part would be on hitting an enemy afflicted with burn, you get that extra 10% firearm attack. This is pretty helpful towards the start of our magazine. It's about a 5-6% buff roughly towards the start. So if you get those burns right away, you're going to be dealing a little bit more damage, which can help out quite a bit. But that's basically it for the unique ability. And going over the actual passives on here, currently I'm running firearm critical hit rate. This is incredibly important. You're going to want that gold. Also, your crit damage doesn't actually matter too much on its range. I think gold is only like a couple percent more. Firearm attack is really nice, just an overall buff. And then once again, I'm running fire attack just to take advantage of its mod a little bit better. If you have no interest in its like unique ability, you can just replace this with like Colossus attack. That's going to be a pretty substantial buff. So you can mess around with those as your passives. So if you are using our Enzo build, I just want to show you that you can get the 100%. So let me pick up my first ability here. And then when I activate my ult, if we take a look at the actual weapon itself, we're sitting here at a max 100% critical hit rate. So it's seriously so good. Once you're going to be just spoiled by this, and you can just lay in and you're doing so much damage. The longer you hold the trigger, the more and more damage you're going to be doing with mental focus. So it's really good for ad clearing as well. You can just spray down the lines of the enemies spawning, and you can do that for such a long time. And that's one of the reasons I like it so much more than the Tamer, is you get that mental focus buff for like 21 bullets at max stacks. which is insane. You're going to be doing so much damage. And if you notice right there was the reload cancel. So if you need to reload, once it's a little past halfway, you can either roll, or if you're playing Enzo, the other thing you can do, and what I do is I place my first ability and then just walk over it. So that way I get the reload cancel and the spawning of my ability. So that next mag that I'm ready to go, I immediately get that huge critical hit rate buff. So something I wanted to show with in terms of fire enhancement, we can see right here with rifle reinforcement, our burns are doing about 6,000 damage to this enemy. If I swap this over to the other variant, so if I go over here and equip fire enhancement really quick, we can see how much more our burns are doing right there, up to 36,000. It can actually be a little bit higher if I get the right proc. So yeah, now we're into like the 40,000s range, and this isn't even like fully set up for it. So the burns can do pretty good damage if you decide to go that route with fire enhancement. I know the DPS numbers in this game don't mean everything, like weak point isn't really associated with this at all, and this is like one of the best multipliers you can be adding to your weapons. But even then, with a weak point mod on here, we're up to 683,000 as our card DPS, which is just absolutely insane. It's so good. This gun has seriously been one of my new favorites. It's this and the Thunder Cage are basically the only two things that I use for weapons. You don't really need much else. Maybe if you throw in like one of the unique snipers, that could be a pretty solid loadout. Thunder Cage, LMG, and the snipers. Sounds like a pretty good setup. So if you want to add this to your loadout, I highly recommend giving this setup a go. It's been amazing for bossing and any mobbing, anything like that. It's been my go-to weapon here on our Enzo. So it's been a really good, worthwhile investment. I wish you best of luck in farming it if this is something that is interesting to you. It isn't too bad. You can get a lot of the parts just from the low tier hard bosses. So there's 2 parts from Devourer, Pyro, and then the Executioner. So it's really not the worst thing in the world. You can probably knock it out in a day or two. But if you guys did enjoy this Enduring Legacy build, make sure you leave a thumbs up on the video to let me know. Also consider subscribing for more First Descendant content. We're gonna have a bunch of builds coming out very shortly, so stay tuned for those. But anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you all in the next video. See ya.